Many of our viewers have asked us to make a video about the collapse of the Soviet Union, so here it is. The Soviet Union was a communist state that spanned over 1/3 of the Earth's landmass and was home to nearly 1/6 of the world's population. It was the largest country in the world, and yet it lasted for only 69 years. So how did it happen? How did this behemoth of a state fall apart after ruling over so much land and people for so long? To understand how it fell, we need to first understand how it stood. In fact, many of them were ardent communists who believed in the Soviet project. But that doesn't mean that they were happy with the way things were going. And in the end, it was Gorbachev who resigned and the Soviet Union was dissolved. Over the next few months, the various republics of the Soviet Union declared their independence and the Cold War came to an end. We'd also like to thank our supporters for their support. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union was in serious trouble, because even though it's gone, its legacy lives on. The Soviet Union was one of the most powerful states of the 20th century, and its actions had a profound impact on the course of history. For example, the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 helped to trigger the Cold War, and the Soviet War with Nazi Germany was one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The Soviet Union was also a major player in the arms race during the Cold War, and its development of nuclear weapons helped to ensure that there would be no World War III. Finally, the legacy of the Soviet Union can be seen in the countries that it once ruled over. Many of these countries are still struggling to come to terms with their Soviet past, and the collapse of the Soviet Union has had a profound impact on the way that they govern themselves and interact with the world around them. The economy was stagnant, the military was overextended, and the political system was increasingly corrupt. And when Mikhail Gorbachev came to power in 1985, he inherited a mess. The Soviet Union was founded in 1922 by Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the Bolshevik Communist Party. It was originally called the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. He introduced policies such as glasnost and perestroika in an effort to bring the Soviet Union out of the doldrums. But these policies of openness and restructuring also unleashed forces that Gorbachev could not control. For example, glasnost led to a surge in nationalism among the various ethnic groups that made up the Soviet Union. Suddenly, people who had been living side by side for decades were demanding independence and self-rule. And before long, the Soviet Union began to break apart at the seams. But after it went through a civil war with the anti-communist White Army and emerged victorious, it began expanding. Any opposition to the Communist Party was met with swift and brutal force. The secret police were notorious for their ruthlessness, and millions upon millions of people perished in forced labor camps simply for being suspected of disloyalty. The Soviet Union was also a highly militarized state. It maintained a massive army and invested heavily in weapons of mass destruction. This was partly due to the paranoia of Soviet leaders who distrusted each other and the rest of the world. But it was also because the Soviet Union was an ideological state. It wasn't just a collection of people living together under one government. It was a nation of people who were all united under the banner of communism. The Soviet leaders believed that they were building a new kind of society, a stateless, classless utopia where everyone was equal. And they were willing to do whatever it took to protect that society from its enemies, whether real or imagined. It swallowed up all of the territory of the Russian Empire and then some, including areas that are today part of Ukraine, Belarus, Moldova, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. After World War II, the Soviets had defeated Germany and were in total control of Eastern Europe. They also controlled areas of Asia and the Pacific. At its greatest territorial extent, the Soviet Union spanned from the Baltic Sea to the Pacific Ocean and from the Arctic Circle to the Himalayas. Now, the Soviets ruled over all of these people with an iron fist. However, despite the brutality of the Soviet regime, the vast majority of people living in the Soviet Union were not actively plotting against it. Gorbachev was a reformer by nature, and he wanted to modernize the Soviet Union and make it more efficient. In 1991, a group of hardline communists attempted a coup against Gorbachev, but it failed. So, why is the study of the Soviet Union important today? If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe.